it's kind of sad to see, but I really feel like a lot of people don't really get why PvP is the way that it is. And I just think that a lot of players have like lists of demands and requests, and Bungie needs to do this, they need to fix this, and why can't they tweak this? But I'm pretty like I've said it in many podcast episodes, but I really don't see a day where Destiny 2 PvP will ever reach a state that most of these players want, because all of these golden ages, like if you think about like when was a good time of Destiny PvP, when was it at its best, when were the golden ages? You'd think like, you know, Destiny 1 launch around Taken King, you'd think for Destiny 2 probably Forsaken. Those were all times where the game was relatively new, but we're never going to get that ever again. The game is too dissected and understood about every single percentage of cone bullet spread and velocity and aim assist and all of these things. It's just, we will never ever we can't go back in time to a point where players were less educated about the game and it was more fun and innocent. We are just at a point where the game has just been figured out and everyone has min-maxed everything, and there are people who are just ridiculously good, and there's so much of a massive gap between players. I just don't see, like, even if they were to, like, you know, add the best map they've ever added, or just nerf this thing that people don't like, or fix these weapons, or, you know, fix the servers, it's obviously a problem, and the connection issues. I can't see this perfect vision that a lot of players fantasize about. I don't see any way that it's actually possible to get that without going back in time. So I just feel like, obviously, you know, I wish that we could get that, because Destiny, as we played many times back in the day, Destiny 1 and 2 PvP was so much fun, and it was what we did during the dry spells of PvE content. But what I think a lot of players want, and again, I'm not saying I agree with it, I'm just saying it is the way it is. What a lot of players want, I just don't see Bungie doing it, and especially also the harsh truth is that it's not financially viable. The amount of money and resources Bungie needs to pump into it to get this hypothetical version that players want, they're not going to see the return on investment on that. So I think they've just cut their losses and said, okay, we're just going to keep Destiny 2 Crucible in just maintenance mode, do the bare minimum to just keep it stable, but we're really going to put all our resources into Marathon. That is our PvP priority, it seems like.
So I think let's clarify a few different bits and pieces with some numbers first, right? I would agree with you that as far as Bungie's priorities, PvP is the secondary rung on the list. Poor Gambit sitting forever. Yeah, sitting forever underwater, as that one meme has, with like the one child being lifted up and the other being like, yeah. But that's Bungie's priorities. The reality is there is a huge, and I really do mean substantial, like well above 40% of the player base that still plays PvP. Like you're looking at the numbers just purely from the unofficial tracker websites that track the number of players on these things, and like, yeah, there are people who still pop into the Crucible every day.
Yeah, I saw that, 40% roughly. It's a lot.
Yeah, like, I grant that number may not be totally accurate, but it's big enough that I'm in that realm, you know? Like, this is not an insignificant number of people who sit there and play Destiny for its PvP. And whilst it may not be Bungie's priority, and whilst there may be a priority of delivering a better PvE experience, there is absolutely a demand for Destiny's PvP to provide more. I don't know what the return on investment type things for that are. And I imagine there's a bunch of stuff of like, hey, if we want to do this, monetizing it more needs to be key, but we can't split up the player population because not everyone will have the same maps, all this other stuff, yada, yada, yada. But it's one of these moments where I think the PvPers' priorities actually should get looked at somewhat. I don't play PvP, but that doesn't mean that however many percentage of people that play it are invalid. Like, that's a sizable enough proportion of people that they should be getting content on a regular basis. And again, I'm not a dev. I don't know the economics of the situation. I don't know how viable it is. But, you know, we're in that place where there should be more PvP content out there for Destiny. Like, yeah, maybe not as much as the PvE content in the game, but certainly way more than there is right now. And that's really the big problem, I think, that PvP players have been grasping at for so long. For the longest time, there was this ever-rising number of days it's been since Bungie released a map in D2.
How much did it get to?
Oh god, it got into the hundreds. I'm pretty sure it rose well above 500. It might have broken 1,000.
500. I feel like it was at least 500.
It's been a long time, and like the PvP player base has made it very clear. Balance passes to them do not count as content. You know, like they feel like they have been continuously starved. Like on the seasonal things, like maybe it's an armor refresh, or maybe it's a weapon that gets added to the trials pool. But for the most part, there's not that much when it comes to it in comparison to the PvE stuff. Compare that even just to the old days of Taken King. You know, granted, it's a very different era of gaming even now. But like, you're looking at how many maps did you get in Taken King? I want to say it was something like 6 to 8. Maybe I'm wrong there. Maybe it's 4 to 6. But I know at very least that we got several new maps, and that hasn't happened in an expansion in a very long time. And you know, I'll also say this too. Whilst content is one concern, I think it's also seeing the fact that Marathon is getting all the bells and whistles that Destiny players have been asking for in PvP for years. You know, like
that would sting. I get that.
Like even now, after BattleEye has been launched and improved, and after Bungie has gone after certain companies that sell cheats, there are just so many people out there in Trials of Osiris that you find that are cheating, and BattleEye hasn't caught them. You know, like Bungie issues a bunch of ban waves and they go out, and sometimes some of the people caught by those ban waves are people who are just using macros for speedrunning. And it's like, okay, I mean, I'm not sure that's quite what we should be doing, but you know, that's one thing. And if I'm not mistaken, some of those bans were revoked, which rightly so at that point, because the speedrunning community is not a problem. They are a credit to the Destiny community as far as I'm concerned, and they make the game better as far as its online profile and everything else. I'm sure Bungie understands that. But, you know, sitting there and seeing all the bells and whistles that Marathon's going to get from the PvP standpoint, and then sitting there and seeing how Destiny has lacked those for so long, you know, people who have done Trials of Osiris forever, like Grenada Jake, he's taking a break now. Like, these are people who have stuck with Destiny through thick and thin, through all the troublesome expansions, and have kept doing things like Trials of Osiris, and have continuously done things like Comp, and have been grinding the PvP side of the game for a very long time, have really pushed into what the game has to offer and understand it to its depth. He's helped something like over 3,000 people reach the Lighthouse. He's now taking a break. Because, you know, he's reached his breaking point. And Marathon is unfortunately leaving a bitter pill in the mouth for that.
And it's still just far away.
Yeah, and it's still very far away. Now, people are sitting there and saying that, and maybe this is me inflating the idea of PvP devs versus devs in every other department, but people are conflating this idea of, oh, all of Bungie's development time and money is being sucked away to Marathon, is being funneled into their new game, which is not. I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to throw some water on that argument, and I know that's very compelling to a lot of people. And from the PvP dev side of things, I think there's a very legitimate point. We've seen lots of their higher-ups move on to Marathon, and it's clear that there's a lot of talent on that team, which, you know, fair enough for those devs. I'm sure they have great jobs right now. But it's one of the moments at which I think that does not apply to the health of the game overall. You know, and that's a very important distinction to make. It certainly is indicative of a PvP state, but people are applying that to the wider game. And that is, I mean, 6 months ago, we were talking about how Bungie was going on a hiring spree and was increasing the studio in terms of its hiring by, you know, measures of more than double-digit percentages. Like, a lot of people are getting hired over at Bungie across all sorts of different disciplines on both teams, both Destiny and Marathon. So it's like, you can absolutely make that speculation when it comes to the PvP side of the game, but Bungie as a studio is growing in size, if I'm to remember correctly, from 6 months ago. Like, the 6 months is not a vacuum.
Hiring spree.
They continue to hire more people, and it's not
expanded their studios and got like a whole new building, and that's definitely
have
correct.
More people working remote from across the whole of the US. Like, the number of devs has not dropped suddenly. They've not created a skeleton crew for Destiny that's going to handle all of Final Shape. The PvP crowd, maybe. I can't comment on the size of that because no one knows, right? Like, it's not something that Bungie's going to talk about because, I mean, it's their own internal studio business. But when it comes to the idea of people trying to take that and apply it to the entire game and saying that Destiny in its entirety is funding Marathon, technically true, but also not in the way that people are trying to skew it, where they're trying to say that Destiny is this, you know, little phylactery that is creating the lich that is Marathon. Like, That's not.
And they've also got
it's a fun, compelling image to have this idea that, you know, Marathon is the vampire feeding off of Destiny's corpse, but Destiny isn't a corpse in the first place. You know, like, the player numbers are super high, they're still making a ton of money, and they're still planning on making content. Destiny isn't dead, you know, like...
But it's easy to come up with these narratives when we don't understand anything about game development. It's like, oh, Bungie, you're abandoning this. I mean, they've also got the new Amsterdam studio as well, so they're expanding worldwide. Yeah. But
I will... Yeah, go on.
No, you go on.
I will say that those gameplay narratives, the player narratives of, like, they're doing this, it's understandable how you could come to that conclusion. But again, it arises from the fact that we all have imperfect information. I think we all need a little self-awareness to sit there and remind ourselves, like, hey, we're out. Yeah, exactly. Like, we only get to look through the frosted glass, and we get to see the shadows behind the wall, and we don't know what the hell any of those mean.
Yeah.
Like, we can't see any of the details and the nitty-gritty that goes into the development process of it. And that's, you know, just because that's how the entire system of it works.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we all have that moment. I am 99% sure every gamer in the universe has sat there and had a backseat game development moment.
Oh yeah,
myself very much included.
We probably do it at least a couple times on each episode. It's part of the it's part of the fun of life. But I think there's a bit of a not miscommunication, but just distortion of the truth between. Bungie are obviously advertising how many new devs they've got and showing you familiar faces and talking about how many devs they've got to try and instill confidence in that we're putting a lot of effort into Marathon, but I think a lot of people are taking that as if, oh, they've taken all the devs. I know there's still a lot of people working on Destiny 2. They're just trying to encourage that it isn't just like 3 people working on Marathon. We have a lot of big names, heavy hitters, very experienced Bungie devs. So a lot of people are taking that as, oh, they've just taken all the developers. But business-wise, Destiny is the golden goose and it is the cash cow. So they aren't just going to be abandoning it to take a risk on a brand new game. They are going to be still prioritizing Destiny and then hope that Marathon can be financially viable. But it's definitely not the case that they're just going to just sack off Destiny and just this one of the most successful game franchises of all time against all odds. Very surprising. For going on for a decade, they're not going to just completely get rid of that to take a chance on a game that might not even do too well. Who knows? By the time it comes out, maybe extraction shooters are a retired genre.